I had the amazing opportunity to interview Amber Kavanaugh, also known as the West Coast Medium. In 2021, Amber had a stroke that permanently destroyed almost 25% of her brain. During this emergency, she had an incredible journey on the other side where she had to make a choice whether to come back or not. We uploaded a shorter film of this, but since I was so excited to speak with her, I thought I'd share my full conversation with Amber. Here it is. My first question is, who were you before your near-death experience?
My near-death experience was in 2021, so almost 3 years ago, Christmas. And before that, I am a wife, a mom, but I did have quite a unique job before. I was in mental health and addictions for maybe a decade. That's what I went to school for, was social work. But in 2015, I accepted my gifts as a psychic medium, a medical intuitive, a healer, and an animal communicator. It's hard to remember them all. And so that's what I was doing. I was working as a psychic, as a medium, as well as raising my kids. And, I was doing shows on the road and stuff like that. But honestly, I really was mostly just a stay-at-home mom. My husband works away, and so most of the time I was just home with my kids while having a spiritual life. But I'm the most type A, non-spiritual, spiritual person. So I don't think I fit the regular molds. But yeah, so that's what I was doing before.
And can you tell me more about, having that spiritual side before your NDE? I know you had psychic visions as a child. Can you tell me about that?
So I always say I was born different. So I was like an 80-year-old, 3-year-old. Nothing made sense. It didn't make sense that I was a kid and doing kid things. I was always introverted, a little bit more quiet, and I could see people that other people couldn't see. And honestly, again, I am kind of very human and type A. I tried to just pretend I didn't because there are mental health issues in my family. So automatically I just thought, I must be crazy. So I didn't want to tell anybody. I also, until I was about, around 7, I didn't, or maybe, I can't remember, 4-ish, I didn't know that other people couldn't see all the people I saw. So I just thought adults ignored some people, and I didn't quite get why. But I also would have super scary dreams and sort of scenarios, even when I was awake, that would play through my head. And it was always horrible things, like plane crashes or animal attacks or drownings or people getting injured, hurt, whatever. And I, at 7, in my mind, I was causing all of these people to get hurt or murdered or injured or whatever. And so it was not a fun childhood by any means. And it continued through my teen years and early 20s, pretty much until I had kids and could really shift my focus. But it wasn't fun. People always ask me, are your kids gifted like you? And my answer is always, I hope not, because it was horrible. And I hated it. I literally hated it until I accepted my gifts and I knew what to do and how to do it and how to set boundaries. But it was not fun. If people watch me at all or read my book, I go into it, it wasn't great. I was out of the house by 14, trying to survive on my own. And then I turned to religion because in my mind, if you're feeling disconnected or there's some kind of spiritual calling, that's religion, right? That's God. And so I turned to religion for a decade, maybe 15 years, thinking that was the answer, which was hard because the religion I chose judged people who were born like me. And so it was I was this person who couldn't really say who I was, trying to fit a mold that I never fit. And it was a out-of-body experience my whole life where I was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it was just never going to happen.
That's interesting. I never considered how, horrible it could be to receive those types of visions. Can you tell me about now your near-death experience, I suppose, days, hours leading up to your stroke?
Yeah, so Um, Again, I was just mom, right? And I've always, with work, because I kind of make my own schedule, I take summers off to be with my kids, and I take most of December off to be home. I'm a Christmas crazy person, which I don't know why, because horrible things always happen at Christmas, but I still love it. And it had been COVID. And in Canada, we did have like some pretty strict rules we had to follow. Even in 2021, that was going to be the first Christmas since COVID hit that I could have family and friends over. And I always have done, a huge Christmas Eve dinner with like 40 people. So I was so excited. But the few weeks leading up to it, it felt like weird. And I just thought, all of us probably feel like that because of COVID. And maybe I'm anxious because people are going to come over, and that's extra scary. And then also there was a lot of like back and forth because I couldn't invite, we were only allowed, I think it was 10 people, 6 or 10 people or something. So it was like pared down, right? So I thought, well, maybe that's why I'm anxious. But a couple of weeks before, I started, instead of doing all the baking I was supposed to be doing, I started making freezer meals. And I was like, what the heck, like, why? I need the freezer for all the food for Christmas. And I made 6 weeks of frozen meals. And my husband came home from work because he works away, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, why do we have like spaghetti and chili and soup? Like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, I don't know. I just feel like I have to, and I couldn't understand. And then I put it to the back of my mind, and we're leading up to Christmas, and we did a day of like decorating gingerbread houses with the kids and my old foster kids and my husband. And it was an amazing day. And then at the nighttime, like 8 o'clock or something, we were going to watch a Christmas movie because it was December 23rd. We were all excited. The next day was going to be our first big dinner. But I started getting like the worst headache of my life, like so bad that I couldn't even see straight. So I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm just going to go to bed. I feel horrible. And apparently like an hour later, I texted my husband and said, can you bring me some Tylenol and Advil? They were still watching the movie because my head hurts so bad. And he brought them. And apparently then I went into unconsciousness. Like I took the medication and I fell asleep. The doctors think I probably started having the stroke around 11:30 at night. And I didn't wake up till 4:45 in the morning. And I woke up completely paralyzed on my right side and nonverbal. So I only could say 2 words, my sister's name and the F word, which is really great. Because actually swearing and singing is in a different part of your brain than speaking. And so my husband had fallen asleep on the couch. And I won't go into all the medical stuff because it bores people, I think, sometimes if they don't understand medical stuff. But essentially, I tried to get up to go to the bathroom because I felt weird. And I thought I was kind of dreaming. And I used to have like spider dreams where there'd be spiders in my bed or like my teeth falling out dreams. And so I just thought I was dreaming. So I tried to stand up, not knowing I was paralyzed, and I fell to the ground. And then I couldn't move or get up, and I couldn't reach my phone or a light. So I tried to army crawl to the door, and I couldn't. And so there was a wall, and I hit the wall really, really loud. And it woke up my husband and actually my mom as well, because they were living in my basement suite. And my husband came into the room, and I was clearly not well. He knew right away it was a stroke because he had some first aid training. So he called 911. We got me to the hospital. The paramedics didn't think I was having a stroke, so they went really slow. But it wouldn't have mattered because there is like an acronym for when you've had a stroke called Be Fast. Essentially, you need that medication within a certain amount of time or it doesn't work because your brain keeps bleeding. So my brain had bled so much that I had it's called a completed stroke. So it was as far as it could go in this part of my brain, my midbrain on the left side. And then because I didn't wake up, I had started having a stroke in my frontal lobe as well. And so I got to the hospital. They gave me the medication to stop the stroke, but it didn't work. It did stop the frontal lobe one. The damage was already done in the midbrain. And so they wanted to life flight me to another hospital because where I live, they can't do neurosurgery. They don't have a neurosurgeon. And so that's what they decided. I was going to be life flighted. They let Mike go with me. All my family came to say goodbye because the doctor essentially said more than likely she will die before she gets to the other hospital. So they even told my kids at the time were 12 and 14, and they said, say everything you can to your mom because more than likely you won't see her again. And in that time, a lot of other things happened medically. I actually was anaphylactic to the Benadryl they give you with the TPA, and so many different things kind of happened. But again, it's just all sort of medical complications. So I got into the helicopter. My family waved goodbye, like at the gate of the helicopter landing pad thing. And they all went in their cars to go pack bags and whatever to drive. It was about a 2-hour drive because the weather was bad. And I took off in the helicopter with my husband beside me. And that is where I went to the other side, was in the helicopter. We lifted up and I could see, and I was around, like I was there for part of it, and I was watching. It's a very, I don't know, a life flight is just a really different experience because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of noise, a lot of machines, and like no space. Like it was almost like suffocating, all the tubes and all these things. And my eyes were open and I was aware and looking around. I was very scared, like more scared than I've ever been in my life. It's so crazy to not be able to say what you're thinking or feeling. And I didn't really know that I wasn't talking. Like I would make noises and I thought I was talking, but everybody around me afterwards said, no, like you were just saying Michelle over and over and over again. And then mumbling and stuff. But my brain, like the aphasia part, I thought I was talking. And so the sun hit my face and my husband went to cover my eyes because I was also getting a fever, which can happen when you're sort of near death. Your body can heat up. And I looked upset because it was covering my eyes because that sun hitting my face, as soon as it hit my face, I was in my body and then I wasn't. I was on the other side. Like it was that quick. And I could see my body, I could see my husband, but then all of a sudden I could also see my kids driving to my house, and I could see my sisters, and I could see everything the whole time. But I also wasn't in my body. I woke up, or not really woke up, just opened my eyes. I didn't go towards the light. You know, there was no tunnel or anything like that. I just woke up, opened my eyes, and I was in the most beautiful garden I have ever seen or experienced. I don't think Earth could have a garden like that. I think that's the shortest I've told that. The medical stuff, yeah, it's long and it's confusing, and people always get really angry when I tell it. So I think for some things, maybe I shouldn't make everybody angry.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because I felt the same way when I listened to your interview for the first time. Like, I felt, angry at, like, you know, the hospital and just everything. Is that what you mean? Yeah,
well, and the paramedics and
yes.
And my husband was very angry about. He was just angry in general. It's not fun to have your wife, try to die.
You woke up in this garden, but you could also see your kids and your family. What was that like, watching them come to the hospital? Could you hear what they were thinking?
Yeah, I could hear. It's not even hearing, because everything is like telepathic. So when I opened my eyes, I was wearing a beautiful white dress, and my feet, I didn't have shoes on, my feet were on the grass, and looking sort of around me, I was in a field, but there was so many flowers, and there was like a little pond type thing, and then a gazebo that had like a creek running under it. And my guides, who I already knew because of my work, I worked with my guides all the time, were sitting/standing by the gazebo. And then sort of to the left was my crossed over loved ones. So 2 of my grandparents, my mother-in-law, my dogs, because that's helpful. And I just, you miss your dogs when they're on the other side. But then there were some things that I was like, well, that's a little bit odd, but not. One of my dogs that was still alive was there, but she was 17 and a half. And she actually ended up dying 4 days after the stroke when I was still in the ICU. So she was like, with certain people that have Alzheimer's, they're kind of in both places. And so I'm assuming that's why I could see my dog that was still alive, but also my husband and my kids were there. Because I was there to make the choice of whether or not I wanted to come back. I think for me, if the choice was leaving my kids to suffer, I obviously would have come back no matter what. So I needed to know that they were going to be okay and I was going to be with them no matter what. And then kind of to the right and up, like the field, there was a giant group of people from all time dimensions, past, present, future, all genders, all races, all cultures. And I know a lot of people don't believe in this, and that's okay, but that was all of my other lives. So it was just to show me the interconnectedness, I think, of our paths here, but also our sort of journey within our collective consciousness. And so as I was standing there, it felt like I was there for 50 years, 100 years. I could feel through the grass everything around me, and everything within my sight glowed with this almost golden sort of rainbow light that was the most love I have ever felt. There was no pressure, but there also was no words, like physical words. Not one word came out of my mouth because everything was telepathic. You think it, and everyone around you knows it. They think it, and I know it. I didn't run up to like my Nana, I loved her so much. We were so close. And you'd think, you see somebody that's been dead for a decade or maybe more. I didn't run up to her and hug her because you didn't need to, because you just knew what everyone was thinking and feeling, and you could feel their love through the love that was all around me. And so all of that I could pay attention to while also checking on like my family. And it is very true that when somebody is dying, especially I was obviously young-ish, I was 40 when it happened.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bargaining. If you save her, I promise I will do X, Y, Z. If you let her live until I can see her again, I will. And almost all of them were bargaining, panicking. My sister, poor girl, I talk about her, and it's probably embarrassing, but anytime she's under stress or somebody's hurt or sick, she has a horrible belly, and she had to go from the hospital to her house, which is like a 10 to 15-minute drive, like not only panicking and bargaining, but really needing to get to a bathroom. But she didn't want to stop anywhere because she wanted to pack her bags to go. But also, it was Christmas, and the next day was Christmas Eve, and my sister has young kids, and everyone was panicked, everyone was bargaining, everyone was sad, but also everyone was shocked. So there wasn't a ton of like crying because they were shocked. And then I could also see me and my husband, because at that point I had gone into unconsciousness, and he was panicked. He doesn't like helicopters, so he was nervous for that. The weather was not great, so he was nervous for that. And unlike me, he knows nothing about medical anything. And so in his mind, it was going to be okay, and he wasn't going to listen to the doctor. So it was a lot happening at once, but for me, it was very peaceful. I didn't feel like a lot happening because it just felt like I was home, and I was being given this amazing gift of time to make the decision on what I wanted to do. Wow.
I love what you say about the past lives. I'm super interested in that. Did you recognize them right away as your past lives? How did you know that was also you?
Because you know everything. As soon as you're there, you understand everything. I often say there are no whys. There's never a why. Why did I do that? Why did I make that choice? Who are those people? What do they want to say? There's no, the who, what, when, where, why, how doesn't exist on the other side. Everything makes sense. Not only did it make sense that I was so connected to all of those people and that they are all either living right now in this present time or other times or other dimensions, I also was very sort of connected to what I was going to do for the rest of my life if I stayed, and what all of my family would do for the rest of their lives if I chose to not come back. Nothing felt confusing. And I just knew, because even though they didn't look like me, a couple of them looked similar, but they didn't look like me, it was like they were all me. So I didn't need to kind of go, okay, who are you? Hello, when are you living? How are you living? It was like, oh, okay, I remember that life, and I remember what I looked like, and I remember that path and everything I did. you just know everything. I think it's a blessing and a curse, because I wanted so bad to remember absolutely everything, every moment, and the amazing, enlightening things I was learning and participating in. And even though I remember quite a bit of it, it does fade. I call it like human amnesia. So like the things that I got to see or feel or hear start to fade so that I will stay here. Because let me tell you, it's so much easier there. Coming back into a paralyzed, nonverbal body that couldn't eat or talk or do anything, I definitely wanted to go back.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
One more question before, moving further in the story, but can you tell me more about your guides? Because I haven't heard about that in a lot of other stories, like NDE stories.
So I think, again, like it's unique to each person. So in a way, I think we do sort of manifest. And I think this is where people's argument of like you made it up because you saw what you needed to see or wanted to see. And somebody else might just see black, or it might not feel good. And for me, I had a relationship already with my guides. My guides are Gail, Jessica, and Peter. And so Gail and Jessica were sitting there. Peter is a part of the collective consciousness. His name's not Peter. I named him that because his name is weird, like Ka or Ra or some weird thing. So it feels weird to call him that. So I don't. I call him Peter, which I know is weird, but it works for me. And I had such a close relationship with them already that I was able to recognize them and walk up to them. I think a lot of people see what they call either angels or a guiding light or something like that, because not everybody is meant to get to know their guides in each human life. And if you're not meant to, or if it's not part of your path, then they probably won't come and show up in your NDE. Maybe it will be a grandma or a loved one that says, oh, you know what, you have to go back, right? But not everybody will get that gift of their guides being there. But my guides, because they knew me so well and I had been working as a psychic medium in partnership with them since 2015, it just made sense that they were there directing me.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing experience. Seeing them after kind of having them on this side as well for the longest time.
And kind of cool to see their actual physical selves because, you know, when I do work, I can feel them. I can see them if I really need to, but not like concrete humanly. Like I couldn't touch them when I'm like now if they stand in the corner of the room, whereas I got to hug them and I got to like actually feel their energy and like the guidance that they've been giving me my entire life. And they were so great at sort of helping me understand the outcomes of each decision, and also the things that would happen if I went back. And I think that was super helpful in making the decision. And I could argue that no matter what, I was going to come back because we do plan our lives, and I needed the NDE and I needed to go to the other side in order to sort of live the rest of my life. But it did feel like a decision. Like no matter what, there was no judgment, and whatever way I wanted to go, they were there for me.
That's beautiful. So you were there to make the decision. Can you tell me more about that? Were you presented with the decision, or did you just know coming there you had to decide whether to stay or to go back home?
I think I just knew, because again, you don't have to necessarily talk. But while being able to sort of see everything, they also helped me to see and understand the good and the bad and the ugly. So they did say, you know, if I chose to go back, the next 18 months would be the hardest time of my life. And I would regret my decision. I would wish that I had stayed, and I would be very angry. And it was really true. When I woke up, I was on a high for 2 or 3 days. And I had this glow of the other side, and it very quickly went away once I realized, oh, wow, like I'm paralyzed. I can't talk. I have tubes everywhere. I've been tube fed. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I was so brain injured. And all the things that they said I would do, I was like, yeah, right. Like, obviously I was dreaming, because how am I going to get to where they said I would be, you know, doing like public speaking and talking about the collective consciousness and writing books and, like inspiring people. How will I do that if I can't talk? You know, how can I do that if I can't walk? And I didn't understand that, you know, what they said was actual reality, especially because the doctors were pretty much saying, you know, yes, okay, she survived. Because my husband actually decided not to do the brain surgery. We got there and I very quickly had a grand mal seizure. And then I continued to have seizures until they got a bunch of meds in me and helped stop it. And once they got the seizures stopped, the neurosurgeon came to my husband and said, you know, I know she came here for brain surgery, but the damage is kind of done. They did another scan and like my stroke was completed. The other one had stopped and I had TPA, which is a very, very strong blood thinner. And so surgery is super dangerous after TPA. And so he said, you know, I can still do the surgery if you want, but more than likely it will kill her. And so much damage is done. It would be minimal improvement after the surgery. And my husband had no idea what to do, and there was nobody else there. It was just him. And so he said to the neurosurgeon, you know, if it was your wife, like, if it was your wife in that bed, what would you do? And the neurosurgeon said, I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't. And my husband said, well, you're the expert. I'm not doing it. And so I didn't get the brain surgery. And I think the doctor then just sort of said, how she is how she's staying. And he said, you know, as she's in the ICU, if she survives this in the next couple of days, you're going to have to start looking at long-term care. She's going to need care for the rest of her life. Pretty much she's going to stay how she is. I also was blind in my right eye. So I would be half blind, nonverbal, paralyzed, never able to eat because I had no swallowing reflex. I had no bathroom cues or hunger cues. So I wouldn't be able to ever take care of myself. And everybody was like, that's what everybody was saying for that first couple of days. And everybody talked about me around me. So like I couldn't say anything. And yet the doctor's in the room saying like, this is her, she's pretty much a vegetable forever. Like, and like, I think for the type of stroke I had, your 5-year survival rate is between 14 and 28%. So it's not great. But then I went from paralyzed, nonverbal, couldn't eat, couldn't drink. By day 4, I was walking. I had words within a few days, not good and not expressive. I lost tone. So like I talked like a robot and I talked kind of like a baby. But I started walking. I got the tube out of my nose. Like I started eating after a few days. I was able to go to the washroom. They took like the catheter out and everything. And within a week, I was up and moving around. They were still doing a lot of tests. I was still in the neuro ICU for 2 weeks, but they couldn't explain it. And also when I woke up from going to the other side, I wasn't blind anymore. And they can't understand it because I was completely blind. And so I think 6 weeks, like you go for a follow-up, 6 weeks after you get out of the hospital, and I went. And I had a walking stick because I was still learning to walk, but I could talk, I could eat, I could whatever. I was doing rehab. And the neurosurgeon actually called down to the emergency room to see if anybody who was there when I was brought in wanted to come up to see me walk, because they just could not. Because I was young and my kids were there, and it was Christmas, and all these nurses were just devastated that this was going to be my life and that these kids had their mom taken away on Christmas. And in my chart at the very top, it says I am his miraculous patient. That the only reason is a miracle because I shouldn't be here. So every time I go in, because I've had a lot of health complications, the doctors look and they're like, oh, so you're his miracle patient. I'm like, yeah, that's me.
That's beautiful. What was that Christmas like then after you woke up and your family came to visit? Were you able to celebrate in a way?
No. So, well, I guess in somewhat of a way. So the stroke was in the middle of the night on the 23rd. I stayed unconscious for almost 24 hours after the seizure. So that was just December 24th. On December 25th, actually my husband, have you watched that movie? The Santa Claus, where they go to Denny's on Christmas because he burned the turkey. Anyways, that's what my husband did. he took the kids to Denny's for Christmas dinner. And they came and visited me, but I was in the neuro ICU. So it's like you can visit for 15 minutes or something like that. And the neurosurgeon just happened to be coming by, and I still hadn't talked or moved much. And he said, you know what, you guys, I know your mom can't talk, but have you tried singing with her? Because speech is on the left. Well, speech is, get confused, on the left, but singing is on the right. And so they sang with me, and I sang without being able to talk 2 songs with them, 2 Christmas songs.
Wow.
And so for them, that was like a Christmas miracle. But no, Christmas was on pause. We celebrated Christmas the day after I got home in January. But like, I think my first like video that they recorded of me was like the 27th or 8th when I walked. So it was still, even though it was amazing and a miracle, it was a freaking slow one. And it felt like dragging my feet through cement for every gain. It didn't come, even though they said, oh, wow, it's amazing for me. It didn't feel like that. It felt like it was impossible. And I felt like such a burden, because to learn to talk again, you have to, so like one word, they would say the word, I wouldn't be able to say it. They would show me how to say it and then make me repeat it 7 or 8 times to try and get it stuck in my head. And we did that nonstop. And I also was kind of like a baby, like you have the emotions of a child. And so I was explosive. I would cry or laugh at inappropriate times, which is just part of having a stroke. And I was angry, and angry that this is their life now. And I just couldn't understand why I made this choice. And I had such a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that, you know, I'm making my kids and my husband suffer. Like, it felt almost selfish that I chose to come back. Not forever, but for quite a while. I also was on very, very strong anti-seizure meds. And it made me not only feel very, very sick, it made me have the urge to unalive myself, which is a side effect of certain seizure meds. So usually when that happens, it's just like people who take antidepressants and anti-anxieties. Sometimes the medication doesn't agree with them. And so you have to switch. They tried switching me. It almost killed me. So I had to stay on that medication for 6 months to protect my brain. And so I was battling, trying to recover, doing rehab, struggling with my process, and trying not to give in to the side effect of that medication, which is super hard. I was very open and honest. I talked to my family. I got counseling and stuff. They all knew it wasn't actually me. I didn't want to, but it was the medication, and there was nothing I can do about it. I always say it was like a Bad Country song, because it's like I had the stroke. I also then got COVID. My whole family got COVID. The COVID almost killed me. Then I got COVID pneumonia. One of my dogs died when I was in the hospital. Then my next dog died in March, and that was like so devastating. Like, it was just like one after the other. And then every time it was like, oh, okay, I feel a little bit better, something else would happen. You know, somebody would get in an accident, or somebody would get sick, or I would get sick, or I would have a TIA, or, you know, it was nonstop. My guides were very right that the next 18 months would be hell. And it was.
So 18 months, but then how did it start to get better?
It just slowly, so the first 6 months was the hardest. They also took my license because I had a seizure. So when you have a seizure, you have to go on medication, and then you have to be seizure free when you get off that medication for however many months. So I lost my license for the first year. But it just slowly kind of got better. And as I got more independent, it got better. And then the sort of cycle of every time I had a positive, a negative would come, or 10 negatives would come, it started just going away, and started, like, better things started happening. And then I just started feeling inspired again, and my guides started sort of speaking up again. I felt very disconnected from them for a while. And at one point they said, you know, when was this? Was it last year or the year before? They said, you need to paint. You need to try to paint what you saw on the other side. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm brain injured. I can barely write. What do you mean I'm going to paint? That's ridiculous. So I ignored them for a good couple of months. And then finally, like, just try. And I started painting and I couldn't stop. And I tried the best I could to start to paint what I saw on the other side. And it just got better. And then things were presented, opportunities, people asking me to tell my story, which they said I would do that. And it was going to be so helpful to help people not feel alone. Like, this human world is so isolated. Like, we've never been more connected and more disconnected at the same time. It's such a strange world we live in, and everything just started happening for the better. They had said I would write 3 books. I'm like, can't type anymore, can't write anymore, barely have words. I don't know what you're talking about writing a book, but everything just fell into place. And every single thing they said was going to happen has happened so far. And so now I just work on faith that, there's a point to all of it, because it's still hard, even though if you didn't know me, you wouldn't know. I know all the time, every single day. I am missing almost 25% of my brain, and it doesn't grow back. I don't know why I thought it did. In my mind, I just thought, when you injure your brain, yeah, your brain's injured, but it's still there. No, it slots away and you have a giant hole in your head. And so then you can have other little strokes because all of that brain isn't supposed to be exposed. But it just started happening for the better. And I don't know another way to explain it other than I just had faith that they wouldn't have put me and my family, or I wouldn't have, because I planned this life, and my family through this if there wasn't a purpose for it.
Wow. So what have you learned from this experience?
I think personally for me, patience. I am not a patient person, and I have learned more patience for myself and for other people. But also my whole life, I felt so alone. And, even with my kids and my husband and family and friends, I could be surrounded in people. And I just felt like nothing made sense, and that I was kind of this lone island. And going to the other side and understanding that there was not one moment in my entire life where I was ever alone, not even a millisecond. My hardest times in my life, I was surrounded and people who loved me. I think that was a huge takeaway for me, because my whole life I felt so different, and I just felt like I never fit in any group. Even people that I knew loved me, I felt like there was something wrong with me. And occasionally still, not occasionally, 50% of the world does think there's something wrong with me. It's not okay to talk to dead people as a job or as a calling. It's not okay to talk about these things, not in a religious tone or whatever it is. But I have never felt more like I belong than when I'm thinking of and talking about the things that I now know to be true.
That's beautiful, and I think good advice, good for people to hear who do feel alone, who could be watching this. I want to shift gears a little bit. I have a couple other questions. You talked about working as a medium. Can you tell me more about what that process is like for, someone and people who are listening who have no idea how I can't even imagine how you're able to have those conversations. What's the process like for you?
So before I accepted my gifts, it was very out of control. Like, they were just always there, and I didn't understand. I could see them, but I didn't know how to talk to them. Like, I couldn't have a back and forth like we're having.
Okay.
And so it was just confusing because there was all these extra people around, and I didn't know what they wanted, or even if they wanted something, like maybe they were just hanging out and they actually didn't want anything. Once I accepted my gifts, they only would come around for a purpose. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like they were just always around me. Occasionally they are now, just in support, but I knew what they wanted. I knew how to talk to them and how to get the message across. I didn't know how to set boundaries. So in the beginning, I live in somewhat of a smaller town. It's not tiny, but a smaller town. And they would want me to go up to people in like restaurants and stuff. And I was like, no, thank you. That absolutely, like, how long before the whole town thinks I'm completely nuts? And so I learned how to set boundaries. It's not okay to say, you need to go tell that cashier that, her mom is with her and whatever. So I started to be able to set boundaries. And my gifts didn't sort of turn on all at once. The mediumship was first, and then my psychic gifts. And that's the one I fought the most, because when I was religious and I was still going to church when I accepted my gifts, the psychic was the part that they were like that's like, what do they call it, a false prophet. And so that part was harder. And then after a while, I'm also an empath, like a super strong empath. So I always say I can read souls. I don't necessarily listen to sometimes what's coming out of people's mouths, because I know how they feel behind those words. Not good for relationships because sometimes nobody wants you in their head and they don't want you tuning into their soul. So it's a lot of boundary work. And then the medical intuitive and the healing came, and then the animal communicating came after that. And so for me now, it's just everyday life. And I have what I call like a light switch. So when I'm working, the light switch is on. So right now, even though this is more like an interview about me, the light switch is on. My guides are standing in the corner of the room, helping me to tell the parts that they really want to be heard, as well as my stuff. And their thoughts become my words. So when I'm actually working, I sort of put my human self to the side, because I think I'd get really tired if I didn't. And their thoughts, just like on the other side, that it's telepathic, their thoughts become my words. So I don't, before the NDE, I would kind of have to listen and then repeat, which is okay, but I think a lot can get lost in translation, or like maybe I don't interpret it correctly, or I put emphasis on a different thing than they were intending. And then after the NDE, once I had the experience of complete telepathy, it's so much easier, which is crazy because I'm missing so much of my brain. I don't know how it's so much easier, but literally they think it, and their thoughts come out of my mouth. So I don't have to interpret. I don't have to listen and repeat. I don't have to clarify. Once in a while, I argue if they're trying to say something that I'm like, really, you think that's going to be helpful? Or it makes me uncomfortable. Like, oh, I don't think I want to say that to that person. But it's so much easier now. And I can do it like in a much more connected way, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's really interesting. Just especially about things like boundaries and everything that you have to, things people don't usually think about when they're imagining the profession. One of my last questions, can you tell me about your book?
Yes, so it's called At the Stroke of Eternity. And I started writing it, it came out a year ago. And so somebody helped me. So I talked and they typed. And it's also written, now looking back, like I would change so much just because I didn't have a lot of words. Like I was still learning to talk. And so it is a very simple, simply written book, but it talks about everything. So a little bit about my childhood, and then about the stroke, going to the other side, and then all the lessons that I learned. It also has pictures, because I like pictures in a book. Oh, here, I'll show it. So there you go, it's right here.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and so yeah, it has pictures, it has poems at the beginning of every chapter, because I also wrote poems. I wrote poems before the stroke. I'm just trying to see if my brain is there, because I know people don't believe me when I say like I'm missing so much of my brain. Oh, there we go. There's my brain. So, whoops. This is the main stroke, that big white area, and then a frontal lobe stroke. Because people afterwards, so many people were like, yeah, right. Like I've known people who have had strokes. You have not. I'm like, I don't think I could fake a stroke like that. It doesn't necessarily make sense. But then, yeah, I also started painting. And so some of my paintings are in there as well. I don't do anything with the paintings. They just kind of sit here. But I enjoy it. I have fun with it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and then each one of my guides has a chapter at the end. So there's a chapter for Gail, Jessica, and Peter. And then, yeah, there's a chapter on boundaries, because it's so important when you want to do any type of spiritual work. One on being an empath, because it's hard. It's hard to feel everybody's feelings, especially in this world when there's so much anger and hate and that sort of stuff.
My last question, is there anything else you think would be important to share?
I think, and I always say this, it's just, I want everyone to know that they are never, ever alone. I have guides, and that's wonderful, and I can see mine, but so do you and everyone listening. It doesn't matter what your religion is, what your beliefs are. You can be an atheist or a Catholic or Jewish, whatever. Every human on this planet has guides, has a higher energy, whatever you want to call it, source, God, doesn't matter. There is somebody walking with you every moment of your life. And people don't have to believe that I had an NDE and went to the other side and got to make the choice and that sort of stuff. That's fine. And you know what? Like, I know there are people that really think our brains can do that, right? Can have this crazy dream and that sort of stuff. But all of the things that have happened since, all the things they said would happen, have all happened. And I think it's just testament that they are with me and they weren't lying and I'm not making them up, but just that we aren't alone and that there is a purpose to everything. Our collective consciousness as a whole is growing, and we are going to be seeing more and more people like me being born. You know, in the 80s when I was born, it was nuts to be a psychic medium. Like you called the 1-900 number. I think you're younger than me, so probably you wouldn't remember this, but the 1-900 dial a psychic and you paid like $2 a minute to get your astral whatever. It wasn't average, it wasn't normal, it wasn't common. But as the collective consciousness is moving towards becoming more connected, more children are going to be born like me, feeling like they don't fit, feeling completely alone, even as a small child. And if there's somebody that can tell them, hey, you know what, there's a reason you feel alone. There's a reason you feel like you're so different. And it's because you're this wonderful little soul that's lived a lot. And, you know, you're gonna get it. You're gonna feel like you make sense at some point. It would have been so helpful for me when I was young if somebody could just say, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, you are not this horrible person who is causing bad things to happen. It's actually not you causing them. That would have been so helpful to me.